Hello and welcome. In today's episode, we are going to learn more about the origins of uplifting trance. And then of course we'll create some uplifting trance of our own using the Korg Volcas. Let's go! As a start, let us now talk about the origins of this genre. In previous episodes, we found that EDM music actually started with electro-funk, developing into Chicago house and Detroit techno, and then house and techno reached Europe, and it developed into the first trance music. Trance then became very popular, and quite quickly it branched out into a lot of different subgenres. And in the mid-90s you would have ambient trance, Ibiza trance, tropical trance, Eurotrance, melodic trance, uplifting trance, vocal trance, hard trance, progressive trance, psychedelic trance or psytrance, Goa trance and acid trance. But to make it a bit easier to understand all these genres, we can actually group them into different clusters because some of the genres are quite similar to each other. So the first cluster is ambient trance, Ibiza trance and tropical trance. This trance music was basically a bit more chill and designed to play at parties on the beach and was typically played at places like, for example, Ibiza. Typical artists was, for example, DJ Metatron, Above and Beyond or Chicane. Then I think Eurotrance is basically a cluster of its own, since it was designed mainly for radio and MTV. And these tracks were a bit shorter and more straight to the point, and some artists was, for example, Sash, ATB or Cascada. Then the next cluster is finally then melodic trance, uplifting trance and vocal trance. This trance music still had focus on catchy melodies and vocals, but it was designed for the dance floor with breakdowns, build-ups and drops. An example of artists were Tiesto, Ferry Corsten, Armin van Buuren or Paul van Dyk. And as this genre grew more popular, actually radio edits were made, which were like shorter versions of the trance tracks, which were more adapted for radio or MTV. Then we have hard trance, that was more inspired by hardcore techno, was a bit faster and heavier than other trance music. An example of an influential artist in this area was, for example, Gary D. And then in UK, a special trance genre evolved, which came to be called progressive trance. And influential artist in this genre was, for example, John Digweed, Paul Oakenfold or Andy Moore. And finally we have the cluster made up of Goa trance, psychedelic trance and acid trance, which we have already covered in an earlier episode. This cluster focused more on loop-based music, featuring monosynths like the Korg Prophecy or the Roland TB303, and combined this with some pads and some electronic drums. Example of artists in this genre is Infected Mushroom, Astral Projection or Hard Floor. But now in this episode we're going to focus on the cluster including uplifting trance, melodic trance and vocal trance. And now it is time to analyze the sound of that genre. Here we go! So, when creating uplifting trance, there is a quite generic formula you can use. So you start with the intro, that's usually a rhythmic part, which makes it easy for the DJ to mix in the track into the set. Then you have a build-up, and then you have a breakdown where you present your melody. After that, there's another build-up, which then leads to the first drop. And in this kind of trance music, the drop was usually a melodic drop which featured the main synth riff. Then you had the bridge, which presented again the melody, but this time with drums. And then another build-up, which led to the second drop. And then after this you had the outro, which was also drum-based, which should make it easier for the DJ to exit the track and present the next track into the mix. So let us now build an uplifting trance track using this formula, and as usual we're going to use now the Korg Volcas as our main instruments. First, let's look at the drums. So here I've chosen to layer the Volca drum with the Volca beats to get a good drum sound. So on the Volca drum, first I have a kick drum, which I've added quite a lot of drive and distortion. I've also created some kind of snare/hand clap. And also I have a quite low frequency open hat, sounds like this. And these I combine together in a beat that sounds like this. And you may notice that I've used the equalizer to remove a lot of bass on this one. That's because I want to have the sub bass from the Volca beats. So here I use the kick drum, which has quite a lot of sub frequencies. And then I use also the closed hat and the open hat and also the hand clap. And I've created a beat that sounds like this. And when I play these together, I think they create a very good drum sound. So you see how that really adds more sub bass to the beat, which is good for trance music. And then I'm using the Volca bass for the bass line. And I have created a bass line that sounds like this. And when I record that on the sequencer, it sounds like this. And what I do is I then transpose it so I have it in A, in G, and in F. And I store these on different memory slots. So I can use them later in my track. And then I use the Volca FM to create a pad. And I'm using here just a standard preset called Glass Pad. And I play the same chord progression, a quite easy chord progression that's A, G, and F. And it sounds like this. And then I record it on memory slot 1 and 2. So I can play it in pattern sequence, and then it sounds like this. And now it's time for the very important synth lead riff. And of course I'm doing this on the Volca keys, and I'm using unison mode and a slight bit of detune. And then I play a melody that sounds like this. And I record this on different memory slots, and then it sounds like this. So that was the lead, but I think we're missing some acid. Let's add also some acid then from the Volca Nubass, which we can use especially during the build-ups. So let's just play something like this. Something like that, and record that, and it sounds like this. Yes, that would be excellent. Now we'll try to put all of this together and see how it sounds like before we do the final track. And we would also need some lyrics for our trance track. And for that purpose, I've now brought my trance lyrics hat, which I've filled with different quotes from different trance lyrics. So let's see what we find here. For each forgotten kiss. Nice one. I think it's Van Buren from the beginning. I feel my soul. That's a good one. I think it's from some kind of hard trance. Leave the world behind you. Swedish House Mafia. Not really trance, but more progressive. Too late to remember, too early to forget. Cool one. Adam Box actually. I thought of that. I just wanted to have it in a song at some point. It sounded cool. Open my eyes, saltwater rain. Chicane. Tell me why. Super mode. Shooting star in the sky. Yeah, it's a classic. And finally, Deep Blue Ocean. Ferry Karsten and Ocean Lab. Nice one. Okay, good. So now we just mash up these different phrases into some cool trance lyrics. And then I will try to deliver these lyrics. And I must remind you, I'm quite decent producer and composer, but I do not have the vocal skills really to present trance vocals. But I'll do my best, and I will have to use some kind of FX and auto-tuner to make it sound okay. So just to prepare you for that. Okay, cool. Then it's time to present the final track. Let's go.
I feel my soul so deep, I leave the world behind. It's too late to remember, but too early to forget. The salt water in my eyes, it's in my eyes.